Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We begin this Shabbat on this first day of this new secular year, a year we've been waiting to start for, let's say, 9 or 10 months now. How fitting that we begin 2021 by welcoming in Shabbat, by taking a deep breath, by focusing on the week that we have ahead, the year that we have ahead, by taking this time to put what is most important to us first. And so we pray that this is a day of reflection for us, a true Shabbat, a Shabbat to plan out this year ahead, as we often make a tradition of making New Year's resolutions, of taking an assessment of where we are and looking towards the future, much like we do at Rosh Hashanah. This first day of 2021 being the beginning of a Shabbat gives us that opportunity to do the same. We invite you to gather your candles around as we bless our candles and enter into our Shabbat together. Page 2 and 3 in your prayer books if you're following along.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We turn now to page 20 in our prayer books, the words of Lecha Dodi. I was recently told about a good meditative type practice to begin our prayers much like we do blowing out the birthday candles. We take a deep breath in and blow out more than you took in, as if your breath is working extra hard for you. It's a good practice for Lecha Dodi also. Lecha Dodi, our time to take account of the week we've had behind us, but more so to enter into this week full of spirit and joy, full of a sense of celebration. And so let's enter Shabbat that way. Page 20 in our prayer books, the words of Lecha Dodi, we are full of breath as we exhale and experience the joy of entering the Shabbat during this new year.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekavela. 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 Shamur v'zachor v'dibur echad, hishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, Shemo echad, l'Shemo tiferet v'litila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Hitoreri, kiva ora kumiori, uri, shirtameri, kevod Adonai ala nitla. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Please rise and face the entrance to your home. Bo'י v'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'simcha uv'sochola, toch emunah, am segula, bo'י chala, bo'y chala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekavela.
Prior to saying the words of the Baruch Hu, there's a series of psalms intended to help us focus on the days of our week, but also to warm up and to get into the right headspace and heart space for our Shabbat worship. In the midst of Psalm 92, we share the words, Magadlu ma'asacha Adonai. How amazing are these pieces of the world that we get to experience. It's a moment in which our prayer book asks us to practice being in awe of what we see, in awe of what we've achieved, in awe of the world around us. The ways in which today we can look at the world and know that the world is getting healthier, that the world, we pray, is getting better. And so as we turn to the Baruch Hu, page 28, Magalu ma'asacha Adonai, how great are we in awe of all that is working in our world, bettering our world, strengthening our world, allowing us to be safer in our world, and God willing, preserving life in our world. Page 28, we rise for the words of Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach HaMevorach Le'olam Va'id HaMevorach HaMevorach Le'olam Va'id.
As you may know, if you join us for services often, I'm a fan of Alden Solovy's poems and prayers. He wrote one for this moment, for this change in the secular year. He titled it Another Year in Introspection. This evening, in place of our prayer to bless the change from day into evening, I share it as we change from day into evening, from day into Shabbat, from year to year. Another year slips away, as do they all, day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment, many used wisely, and many wasted. Another year opens, as do they all, with anticipation, with wonder and amazement, with excitement, with consolation. Was last year so different from the one before? What will this new year bring? What will I bring to this new year? This I pledge to myself. Love is my answer to grief. Hope is my answer to loss. Strength is my answer to fear. Honor is my answer to slander. And action is my answer to injustice. And this I pledge to you, my sisters and brothers, to see you as you are, to respect your journey, to hear your truth, to stand with you in dignity, to walk with you as a companion and friend. This I pledge to you, God of my ancestors, to seek your wisdom, to follow your command, to obey your law and observe your Sabbath, to rejoice in your works and to do your will. God of time and space, another year slips away, as do they all, and another year opens before me, as do they all, with 100 choices, 1,000 possibilities, and one sacred duty. Life, this life, my life, and our lives. Baruch atah Adonai. Hama'ariv aravim, blessed are you, God who allows us to go from day to night, from year to year, as we share the words of Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malachuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Please be seated and join me in chanting the V'ahavta. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, B'chol lebavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher Elohim mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam levanecha ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
This week we read the last chapters of the book of Genesis as we look toward next week when we begin the book of Exodus. Entering into Exodus, we enter into Egypt. So often we look at Egypt as the place we left, but right now in the Torah it is the place in which we are entering. And we are reminded on Shabbat and every time we come to pray at this moment in the service that Egypt is not a place that is simply at one moment in history, but rather symbolic of the times in which we have entered into challenging places and experiences and known that there will also be an exit to those challenges and a better place. And so we share this prayer as we look towards the book of Exodus in our yearly cycle of Torah, but also as we know that Egypt is a place that we often visit and we often escape. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, and that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Mi Chamocha, page 40 in our prayer book.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef eleh, nora tehilot osef eleh, malachutecha ra'u v'necha bokei hayam, לפני משה מרים, זה לינו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך, לעולם ועד. Please join me in the Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, v'ha'amidenu shamreinu l'chayim, ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, guide wrong from right, O Adonai. Amen. Amen, amen. Amen, amen, amen. Oh, Adonai. Amen. Amen, amen. Amen, amen, amen. Oh, Adonai.
We turn now to page 46 in our prayer books. If you are using the larger version, I'm sorry we haven't announced the bigger pages earlier, page 164, page 46 in the Shabbat edition of the prayer book. We turn to the Amidah, a prayer that recalls the very stories we've just concluded in the book of Genesis of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of Rebekah and Rachel, of Sarah and Leah, of all of our ancestors from that time until now, the strength that they have had, the struggles that they've survived, the blessings that they've uttered, and the prayers that they've wished for. We call upon them in the Amidah as we turn towards our most personal prayers. Please rise with us if you would like, page 46, as we begin this prayer.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, Eloyom, Gomel Chasadim Ktovim, Ve'Konei Hakol. וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה הכל אתה, רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחוקר חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומחיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל.
In the midst of our Amidah, we take a moment to be grateful. God of goodness, let's give thanks for the gift of life, for the wonder we experience beyond the words, for the things we see, the awareness of our soul, for the light that comes from within that we notice in others, and for the world around us, so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we take this moment to offer our thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulcha na'eh lahodot. As we stand in awe and awareness and in gratitude for all that we have, so too we pray for the repair of all that is broken. Page 60 or page 178 in the larger version of our prayer book, the words of Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rava Yisrael Amcha. Tasim le'olam. V'tov b'necha levarech et Amcha Yisrael. V'chol et uv'chol shah b'shlomecha. Shalom Rava Yisrael Amcha. Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rava Yisrael Amcha. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Please take a moment for silent meditation. Shalom, bimromav uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'yakum Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom, bimromav uyaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'yakol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom b'meromav uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'yakol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'yakol Yisrael ve'imeru amen.
We take this moment to set aside our thoughts and prayers for those whom we know are suffering physically, emotionally, spiritually at this very moment. We turn our thoughts towards them as we wish for them a refuah shlema, a full sense of feeling their most full and whole self. And so we share the words of Misha Berach, page 253 in our prayer books. We invite you, if you're on YouTube or Facebook with us, to share the names in the feed, in the chat, or to share the names aloud in your homes as we add the names of our loved ones to these very prayers.
Misha Berach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Laimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I know it is just the beginning of Shabbat, but I want to speak for a moment about Havdalah, about what the ritual we so often do at the end of Shabbat. Havdalah is a brief service of separation. Many of us love it for its soothing music, for the sensory experience of smelling spices and tasting wine and looking at a beautifully braided candle. But the purpose of Havdalah is not for us to focus on the rituals, but rather for the rituals to focus us on something else, on what we should be holding on to and what we should be letting go of. Hamavdil bein kodesh lachol, we say. Hold on to the holy, hold on to the sacred, hold on to the eternal, to that which brings light, and let go of the ordinary, let go of the mundane, let go of the darkness. I'm not sure there has ever been a collective moment of Havdalah as awaited for, at least in our lives, as the moment we are in now, the moment of ending the year 2020 and beginning the year 2021. Oh, how desperately we have longed for this year to end and a new one to begin. But as I shared a few months ago at our religious New Year on Rosh Hashanah, we know that in fact the change from one year to the next does not wipe the slate clean in reality. COVID-19 will be here in 2021 just as it was in 2020, at least for the foreseeable future. Havdalah moments do not give us a clean slate or magically bring blessings into our lives. This is why Havdalah is so important. It is not about making a blessing in a moment. Havdalah is about taking advantage of a moment of transition. It's about stopping between two moments, between Shabbat and the week, between one year and the next, between the past and the future, in order to bring the best parts of what came before into what we hope to be the best parts of our future. And this week is not only the week that we finally turn the page from 2020 to 2021, it's also the week in which we conclude the book of Genesis and move from the story of Joseph into the story of Moses in the book of Exodus. In Joseph's dying words, he makes a rather strange request. He says to his children, "When you are able to go to the promised land, I want you to take my bones with you. Don't leave me in Egypt." And as unusual as that request might be, even more peculiar is that Moses, some 400 years later, follows through with that very promise. In the harried moments of leaving Egypt after the plagues and the many efforts to leave Pharaoh's slavery, we know that the Israelites packed quickly to start marching toward freedom. We eat that very matzah that we are told burned on their backs because they moved so quickly. But Exodus chapter 13 tells us that Moses stopped in the midst of all of the chaos to follow through on Joseph's request, to take the bones of Joseph on his back and to carry them to the promised land. One of my teachers asked us once to think about the imagery of the Israelites marching through the desert. And in one ark, they carry the broken tablets, and in the other ark, they carry the bones of Joseph. What could it have meant to them to carry these two pieces of their history with them into the future? And the commentators on the Exodus passage say that it was in that moment that while the Israelites were rushing around grabbing whatever they could, gold, silver, things of material value to take into their journey in the wilderness and to the promised land, that Moses was not interested in anything material, but rather stopped to grab the bones of Joseph because they represented mitzvot, the commandments, the values, the deeds that he wanted to remember to do in the future. So here we are, on the verge of leaving a dark year behind us, a year that perhaps enslaved us in ways. with no promises that the year ahead will be magically different. But the question of Havdalah is upon us. What is it that we will carry with us? What is the good that we will bring? What are the sacred pieces, the mitzvot, that we want to have on our backs as we move toward a better place? Officially, there are 613 mitzvot. We are lucky that Maimonides was kind enough to separate them into positive and negative and to give each one a number. And so yesterday, I looked through the list. And there are a lot of mitzvot that stand out as unique this year, as incredibly valuable. But I want to share just 4 that I think taught us the most and ones that I hope we hold on to tightest in the year to come. Perhaps the most obvious. Actually, it's a 2-for-1 deal this time. Mitzvot 297 and 298. Not to be idle when human life is in danger, and not to leave something behind that may cause harm. We often summarize these mitzvot by simply saying that we, the Jewish people, value the protection of life above all else. But this year, the words stand out differently. Of course we value life, but this year, it means much more to say the mitzvah exactly as it is written, to not be idle when human life is in danger, to leave nothing behind that could harm anyone. The mitzvah is not just about the value of life. It is about the way in which all of our lives are connected, even when we aren't in the same room. How can we not carry into 2021 the ways in which we could not be idle or indifferent? Wearing a mask perhaps being the most obvious, but there are thousands of others. Think of all the actions that we learned to take this year, the way we touch a doorknob or greet a stranger. I know it was sometimes hard to see through the cloud of confusion and distrust and all of the different messages that seem to be floating around in the universe, but for the most part, we became a society that took these mitzvot seriously. We recognized that every breath we take, that everything we touch, every place we go, all the people we interact with, that it impacts our world, not just us, that as much as we want to perhaps seclude ourselves into a bubble, there is no such thing, and that what we leave behind, that could be incredibly harmful to a stranger we do not know. And that is how we value life. I hope we bring that value into 2021 and well beyond the years of the pandemic. Mitzvah number 59. Sound the shofar when sacrifices are made during times of trouble. Yes, the sacrifices of Mitzvah 59 were originally animals placed on an altar. But in 2020, we became intensely aware of other types of sacrifices, of people who make sacrifices when times are troubling. A year ago, none of us knew what it meant to be an essential worker. But now, this past year taught us exactly who is essential. From nurses to food service workers to the delivery woman, 2020 screamed aloud all the people who truly make our lives livable. And now, as we watch the rollout of vaccines in 2021, we are reminded again, as these people are those to get the vaccine first and those we have to thank, for without their sacrifices, we would be unable to live our lives. Mitzvah number 208. Perhaps one that's not so obvious. Weights and scales must be accurate. For the Israelites, this meant that you had to be able to trust those who gave you goods or information. I'm not sure we mastered this one this year, but we certainly suffered the consequences of not knowing who to trust. The damage caused by misinformation was no less than life-threatening. And so I pray that we remember how important accurate information is, that we return to relying on science and research without the worry that leaders are putting their fingers on the scales, and that we know this applies not only to the scientific world, the medical world, but the justice system as well. We may not have embodied this mitzvah this year, but we suffered because of it, because it wasn't followed, and we know we can do better. And finally, I believe most importantly, in this moment of annual Havdalah, mitzvah number 46, that we are to never settle in Egypt ever again. The very most inspiring aspect of 2020 for me, the brightest light and often the source of my optimism, was that we kept moving forward even when there was no end in sight, that we knew we could not look back, that we could not get stuck in our misery or hopelessness, even though they were easy to call upon. And I certainly know that this was not always true for me or each of us in every moment. But overall, time and time again, we watched as people in the public eye and our neighbors, the people who share our homes with us, faced terrible times and kept moving forward. Nothing was more disturbing to me than the many people who cared for or lost a loved one over these socially distanced months. How incredibly unfair it was to not be with loved ones at the very moments when being with them was exactly what we wanted for them and for us. But time and time again, people moved forward. When they couldn't attend their own mother's funeral in person, they put on a tie and spoke to their family through Zoom. When they suffered day in and day out, unable to be at the bedside of their spouse in the hospital, they called constantly. They found ways to connect with the doctors and nurses to know that their loved one was being cared for. They advocated through the phone and email. They learned how to FaceTime with their devices, perhaps that they had never tried before. They did whatever they could to be there, when in fact the only thing they couldn't do was to be there. Not going back to Egypt is not a commandment about a country in the Middle East. It is a commandment about refusing to succumb to the will of the world around us when the world around us is dark. And time again in 2020, we pushed forward against unimaginable scenarios. What strength we showed. So let's carry that strength on our backs with pride and enthusiasm for what we can accomplish in 2021 and the years to come. Hamavdil bein kodesh l'chol, may this moment of transition open up our senses to the many achievements we have made in the past year, to the places where we became stronger, and to the mitzvot we learned from experience. And may the generations that follow not know of 2020 just as a year when we suffered, but as a year when we became stronger, so that their future could be brighter than our past. Shabbat Shalom. We turn now as we rise, page 282, for the words of Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tekedu la liotzer breshit, shelo asanu keguyei ha'arotzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo samchalkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
In nature's ebb and flow, God's eternal law abides. When tears dim our vision or grief clouds our understanding, we often lose sight of God's eternal plan. Yet we know that growth and decay, life and death, all reveal a divine purpose. God, who is our support in the struggles of life, is also our hope in death. We have set God before us and shall not despair, for in God's hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. Under God's protection we abide, and by God's love are we comforted. Life of our life and soul of our soul, cause your light to shine into our hearts and fill our spirits with abiding trust in you. This week, we remember those that our community has lost in the past month: Beverly Heineck, Shirley Cohen, Julie Sturman, Paul Schweibel, and Shirley Letterman. We add to their names Rose Ardman, Nathan Bober, Marianne Bonus, Kenny Brown, Morris Cohen, Leon J. DeBear, Francis Feiner, Rosaline Feinstein, Joyce Faring, Betty Finkel, Linda Merrill Friedman, Bella Ginsberg, Etta Gleichman, Grace Horowitz, Jeffrey M. Katz, William Kavar, Ann Kutnick, Eunice Lee, Evelyn Leshen, Goldie Lipman, Walter M. Loeb, Esther Moses, Ethel L. Noble, Eric Renstrom, Sabin W. Rich, Nelson R. Sherman, Saul Schwartz, Dolly R. Siff, Theodore Scorman, Betty Spielberger, Kay Spitzer, Dan Teitel, Rose Wine, Miriam Weinberg, Dr. Simon L. Weiner, Harry Weiss, Esther Ann Weiner, and Scott Zorn. If you would like to share any other names aloud, we encourage you to do so as we turn to page 294 to share the words of Mourner's Kaddish. Those who would like may rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, B'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uvyomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, B'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mivarach le'alam almei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha, B'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, de'amiran b'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all the world, as we say, Amen. Having connected with those that we've loved and lost, let us connect with those around us, physically or spiritually, with the words that the priest shared over the people. May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you, and may God be gracious unto you. May you feel God's presence within you always, and may you find peace.
Amen.
We raise a glass now as we turn to the words of Kirish, page 5 in our prayer books.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratavanu, v'shabbat kodeshu, v'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lemasi v'reishit. Ki hu yam tefila lamikra kodesh zecher letziat mitrayim. Ki vanu v'acharta v'yotanu kidashta mikohanim v'shabbat kodecha v'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We want to alert you to look out for emails as we begin this new year, as we're bringing on some new elements to services and to our programming as we begin these new months. So please be on the lookout for information by email as we make those changes, and even invite a few people to share blessings during our service, which we're very excited about. We'll close with the words of Adon Olam fitting for this moment. As we enter this new year, as we begin with Shabbat, may it be a restful day and a reflective day, and may the year ahead be happy and certainly healthy.
Adon Olam Asher Melach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa V'chef Sochol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra. Shabbat Shalom and Happy New Year.